The mystery of the Sumerians' origin has left scholars scratching their heads for over a century. These were the people who built the world's first cities, invented writing, and laid the foundations of Mesopotamian civilization, yet their beginnings are lost within the midst of prehistory. Who were they, and where did they come from? The story of their rediscovery began not in the ruins of ancient temples, but in libraries and museums, as scholars puzzled over strange clay tablets inscribed with wedge-shaped signs. Today we call this system of writing cuneiform. The word comes from the Latin cuneus, meaning wedge, and forma, meaning shape or form. So cuneiform literally means wedge-shaped. Through painstaking work in the 19th century, these symbols were eventually deciphered, and, at least initially, revealed to record Semitic languages, relatives of Hebrew and Arabic. But among those familiar tongues appeared another, unlike anything known. It was neither Semitic, Indo-European, nor Elamite. Its grammar and structure were completely alien. In 1852, the English scholar Sir Henry Rawlinson suggested that this strange language might belong to the Turanian or Scythian peoples of Central Asia. He later coined the term Akkadian for the Semitic dialects of Babylonia, after the term Akkad, which it was determined the land had once been called. That's actually only part of it. The phrase Mat Shumeri u Akkadi also appeared quite frequently in cuneiform texts, especially in royal inscriptions. It translated to Land of Sumer and Akkad. In 1869, the French scholar Jules Soper advanced a daring theory. He argued that Mesopotamian inscriptions referring to the land of Sumer and Akkad pointed to two distinct peoples, one Semitic, specifically the people of Akkad, and the other, those from Sumer, from somewhere else. Thus, the forgotten civilization of Sumer re-entered history, not through excavation, but through philology, or the study of ancient languages. At first, linguists sought the Sumerians' homeland by comparing their language with others. Sumerian was agglutinative, meaning that words were built by adding suffixes, such as in Turkish or Finnish. So, perhaps they had come from Central Asia or the Uralic steppe. However, as bilingual tablets emerged, written in both Sumerian and Akkadian, scholars realized the language was an isolate, unrelated to any other on Earth. The trail went cold. But if their tongue could not reveal their origins, perhaps their cities could. In 1877, Ernest de Sarlac began excavations at the site of Tello, once the city of Girsu, the capital of the ancient kingdom of Lagash in southern Iraq. What he uncovered astonished the world. Statues, temples, and thousands of tablets written in Sumerian. The people once dismissed as a linguistic abstraction were suddenly tangible, yet the discovery raised new questions. Everything about them, their appearance, their language, even their artistic style, seemed foreign amid the Semitic world of Mesopotamia. Historian Edward Meyer noted their round heads and smooth faces, so unlike the long-bearded Babylonians and Assyrians. To him, they must have been an intrusive people, newcomers to Mesopotamia who came after its native Semitic inhabitants. At least, this was the thinking at the time. But if so, then from where? Some scholars pointed eastward, towards the mountains of Iran. The Sumerian word kur could mean both mountain or foreign land, suggesting a highland homeland. Their stepped pyramid-like temples, the ziggurats, might even echo the sacred peaks of their ancestors. Others envisioned a more dramatic arrival, by sea. The earliest Sumerian cities lay in the deep south near the Persian Gulf. Perhaps they had crossed from Oman or Baluchistan, sailing up the Gulf to settle at the mouths of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. A Babylonian legend, recorded by the 3rd century BC priest Berosus, who was writing a book on Babylonia's history primarily for a Greek-speaking audience, appeared to preserve a memory of this seaborne origin. He told of Oannes, a half-man, half-fish being who rose from the sea to teach humankind the arts of civilization, such as writing, law, and agriculture, before returning to the water each night. Was this simply a myth, or a distorted echo of real events? A people who had emerged from the sea, bringing knowledge to Mesopotamia. For decades, this theory captivated imaginations. Then, archaeology advanced, sweeping aside speculation. Excavations from the 1920s onward uncovered a continuous cultural sequence stretching back to the Ubaid and Halaf periods, long before the rise of Sumer. At Eridu, later revered as the oldest of all cities, 17 layers of successive temples were found, each built atop the ruins of the previous, the earliest dating to around 5000 BC. Beneath the later ziggurat lay Ubaid pottery, proving a long, unbroken evolution of settlement in southern Mesopotamia. Perhaps civilization had not arrived from elsewhere, but had grown naturally from the soil of the alluvial plain. Even so, the Sumerian origins problem did not disappear. The earliest cuneiform tablets from the city of Uruk, which date to around 3300 BC, were purely pictographic, composed of symbols without phonetic signs. But was this early form of writing representing Sumerian or some other language? Later tablets were found to contain non-Sumerian words, names of rivers, towns, and objects, implying that earlier peoples had occupied the land before them. Did the Sumerians absorb these predecessors, borrowing from them their language and culture, or had they migrated in from some other unknown region? Scholars remained divided. Seton Lloyd and Henry Frankfurt argued for continuity. For them, the Sumerians were direct descendants of the Ubaid people. Others, like E. A. Spicer and Samuel Noah Kramer, believed they had entered Mesopotamia no later than 3500 BC, perhaps from the east. Yet, excavations from India to the Caucasus yielded nothing that resembled early Sumer. Wherever their cradle might have been, it left no trace. Ancient records, however, revealed wide trade networks linking Mesopotamia to the lands around the Gulf. Inscriptions between 2300 and 1800 BC mention ships from Dilmun, Magan, and Meluhha docking at cities like Ur and the Akkadian capital of Akkad. From Meluhha came gold, lapis lazuli, carnelian, ivory, and precious woods. From Magan, copper and diorite. From Dilmun, goods for exchange. Today, these places are identified with the Indus Valley, Oman, and Bahrain, respectively. When oil exploration began in the 20th century, archaeologists gained access to new sites along the Persian Gulf. They found ancient settlements with pottery identical to that of southern Mesopotamia, proving that the Gulf region had once been a shared cultural zone. Then, in the 1960s, oceanographers discovered that the Persian Gulf had once been dry land. During the Ice Ages, sea levels were much lower. The Tigris and Euphrates joined into one great river and flowed through a broad valley before reaching the sea. As the climate warmed, the rising Gulf slowly flooded this land. It's possible that early farming communities once lived in this now submerged valley, perhaps remembered later as the mythical land of Dilmun, the land of the living, a paradise where there was no sickness or death. As mentioned earlier, scholars identified Dilmun with Bahrain, and perhaps including the now submerged basin between Bahrain and Kuwait. Perhaps this land below the waters preserved a distant memory of the lost plains of the Gulf. But there's no proof that anyone ever settled in this now underwater area. No submerged ruins have been found, and the steady cultural continuity from the Ubaid to the Uruk period argues against a dramatic migration or flood-borne rebirth. This would mean that the Sumerians, in all likelihood, did not arrive from abroad, but evolved from the very peoples who had lived for millennia along the Tigris and Euphrates. Archaeological discoveries across Iraq reinforce this view. From the Shanidar cave in northern Iraq to the plains of Eridu, each layer at such archaeological sites reveals a civilization growing from local roots. Even the earliest Sumerian temples and artifacts bear the imprint of older, indigenous traditions. In the end, the search for a foreign cradle of origin for the Sumerians, whether in Central Asia, Iran, or beneath the Gulf, seems to dissolve under closer examination. As the scholar Henry Frankfurt put it, to chase the birthplace of the Sumerians is to chase a daydream. But the story doesn't end there. In recent decades, breakthroughs in genetics and environmental science have given us new tools to probe this ancient mystery. A major genetic study of the Marsh Arabs, the modern people living in the Tigris-Euphrates marshlands, and often seen as the closest living link to the ancient Sumerians, offers striking evidence of Sumerian origins. Researchers analyzed both male and female DNA from over 100 individuals and found a dominant Middle Eastern genetic signature with only minor traces from South or East Asia. One lineage even shows a local population expansion around 4,000 years ago, the very era of the Sumerian city-states. If the Marsh Arabs do descend from the Sumerians, as many believe, this points to a civilization that was native to southern Mesopotamia and not one that migrated there from afar. Recent environmental studies support this view. Satellite images, soil samples, and geological surveys show that early Sumerian civilization developed in a vast wetland where the rivers met the sea, a landscape of lagoons, reed marshes, and shifting channels. The sea once reached much farther inland than it does today. That's why the ruins of these great cities, Uruk, Ur, Eridu, Lagash, and others, which were once on the coast, are in the middle of arid deserts, tens of miles away from the Gulf. If you want to examine some of these studies, I've linked to them in the video description. Viewed together, the genetic and environmental evidence paints a portrait of continuity and adaptation rather than arrival. The people who built Eridu, Uruk, and Lagash were longtime inhabitants of the delta, heirs to a watery landscape of shifting rivers and fertile mud that shaped their culture and worldview. This story, however, is still unfolding. No confirmed Sumerian DNA has yet been sequenced, and environmental models continue to evolve. So, we could still learn a lot more in the next few years. But what do you think? I'd love to know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. I'd also like to thank the channel's patrons for making videos like this possible. These include, but are certainly not limited to, GrandKick69, Jaap de Graaf, Pasta Frola, Michael Lewis, Daniel Allen, Danny Van Eck, Wenix TV, Robert Morgan, Strobex, Frank, Tim Lane, Sebastian Otaro Korea, Michael Trudell, Leader Titan, Micah G, John Scarberry, Andrew Bomer, Connor Dolson, Krish, Ben Van Rijsvik, David R, Stephen Ball, Gabe, Monty Grimes, Franz Robbins, Cyrus Meir, Diane Astra, Nimrod Near, Hypnosan, Brendan Redman, Faridun Dadachanji, Jimmy Daruwala, Anahide Debu, Gulistan Debu, Sherkam, Farhad Kama, and all of the channel's patrons on Patreon for helping to support this and all future content. Check out the benefits to being a Patreon member, and if you'd like to join, feel free to click the link in the video description. You can also follow History with Sai on Instagram, Facebook, and X, formerly known as Twitter, as well as continue to listen to special audio programs on the History with Sai podcast. Thanks again, and stay safe.